Alright, in this lesson we are practicing using the patterns of a 45-45-90 triangle and a 30-60-90 triangle. So problem number 1 involves a 45-45-90 triangle. In fact, look, here's a picture of a 45-45-90 pattern. Notice that if one of the angles in a right triangle is 45 degrees, the other one has to be 45 degrees. The fact that these two angles are the same means that this is always an isosceles triangle. These two sides will always be the same. The legs will always be equal. Okay, so if this is x, this will be x, and this will be x radical 2. So hold that in your brain for a second. So keeping that in mind, so fine, if this is x, this is x, this is x radical 2. But let's say if this was 7. If this was 7, then that would mean this would be 7, and this would be 7 radical 2, for example. So look, the thing is, if I give you something strange here for x instead of just a plain number, say if I give you 3 radical 2 right here, you can still use the same pattern. X radical 2. So if this is 3 radical 2, this will be 3 radical 2, and this will be 3 radical 2 radical 2. I feel like I should use a different color. Okay, it's 3 radical 2, 3 radical 2, and 3 radical 2 radical 2. Okay, this red 3 radical 2 is the x that's repeating, x, x, x. The blue radical 2 is the radical 2 that comes with the pattern. So 3 radical 2 radical 2. This is going to turn out to be 6. I could put this in my calculator, or I could understand that radical 2 times radical 2 equals 2. So if I put these two radical 2's together, that becomes 2. So then the 3 comes down. So I have 3 times 2, and that's how I knew it was going to be 6. Anyway, so that's some background information. So that is going to allow us to do this problem in the homework. Okay, so here I have something strange for the leg. I have this 2 radical 2 sitting here. But here's the thing. First of all, this is 45 degrees. So these are my isosceles sides right here. So you know how we do x radical 2. Okay? So like this is x, this is x, this is going to be x radical 2. That's the pattern. So in this case, x is 2 radical 2. So if this is 2 radical 2, that means this is 2 radical 2. That means, again, x is 2 radical 2. So if I erase this x and put 2 radical 2, okay, I've got 2 radical 2 radical 2. So this is going to wind up being 4. Okay, so A is equal to 4, and of course B was equal to 2 radical 2. Alright, again, using the pattern, we switch back to red. 45, 45, 90 triangle. These are my legs. So this is x, then this is going to be x root 2. Okay? So these are the same. So I just need to find out what x is, and that'll be the answer. X root 2 must equal 4. So I just need to divide both sides by root 2, like this. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to divide by root 2 on both sides. Okay? So that means x is going to equal 4 over root 2. Just put this in your calculator and see what you get. But I believe it's going to be 2 root 2. Okay, so that means both of these are 2 root 2. So x equals 2 root 2 and also y equals 2 root 2. This is isosceles. These will always be the same. So if this is 2 root 2, this is also 2 root 2. Alright, number 3. Okay, well, if this is 3 radical 2 over 2, guess what? This is 3 radical 2 over 2. These are the isosceles sides. And this will be 3 radical 2 over 2, switching colors. Well, I didn't mean to pick that color. Radical 2. Again, the pattern is x, x, x radical 2. So no matter what ugly expression I put here, I'm going to repeat it and then repeat it and put a radical 2 on it. So it's 3 radical 2 over 2, 3 radical 2 over 2, 3 radical 2 over 2, radical 2. So it's just a matter of simplifying this. I could put this in my calculator. So we've got 3 radical 2 over 2 radical 2. And that turns out to be 3. The answer is 3. Okay, so that means that x is 3 and y is 3 radical 2 over 2. Okay, looking at number 4. Same type of thing, alright? These are the isosceles sides. So, you know how we always do x, x, x radical 2. Smiley face, smiley face, smiley face radical 2. So this is like my smiley face, smiley face, smiley face, radical 2. Alright, so that means 3 radical 2, 3 radical 2, and then 3 radical 2, radical 2. Okay, smiley face, smiley face, smiley face, radical 2. And this is going to wind up being 6. Put that in your calculator if you need to. So that's going to mean, so that means x is equal to 6, like I just said, and y is equal to 3 radical 2. Alrighty then. Number 5. Okay, so this is like we have x, x, and x radical 2. So that means we need to solve this for x. So let's just divide both sides by radical 2. So if I divide by radical 2 on both sides like this, okay, so that's going to give me that x is equal to 6 over radical 2. If I put that in my calculator, that's going to give me 3 radical 2. Okay, so that's x right there. And then y, you know, x equals y in this case. These are isosceles, they're the same. Alright, so x equals 3 radical 2 and y also equals 3 radical 2. Okay. So same thing again. Alright, there's my x right there. If this is x, then this is x, and this is x radical 2. Okay? So, focus on this equation up here. I'm going to recopy it off to the side, so I have room to do my work. Okay, so x radical 2 is equal to 2 radical 6. So again, if I want to get x by itself, I'm just going to divide both sides by radical 2. Divide by radical 2. Okay? So that's going to give me x equals. Look, you can put this in your calculator if you want, but guess what? Radical 6 divided by radical 2 is radical 3. So this is going to wind up being 2 radical 3. But say if you didn't know that, 2 radical 6 over radical 2. You could just put that in your calculator like this. Okay, 2 radical 6 over radical 2. And there you go, 2 radical 3. Okay, so x is 2 radical 3, and then x and y are equal, so that means y is equal to 2 radical 3. Alright, that's how you do number 6. Now, number 7 and 8 involve a brand new pattern. Now look, here's the deal. Every 30, 60, 90 triangle is half of an equilateral triangle. So this is the pattern that we're going to arrive at, where you have a short leg and then a longer leg and then the hypotenuse. And it's going to turn out that the hypotenuse is always double the short leg, and it's going to turn out that the longer leg is always the short leg times radical 3. So everything is all about the short leg. So I really want you to focus on that. The short leg is the thing that we call x, and then everything comes from that. If you double it, you get the hypotenuse. If you put a radical 3 on it, you get the long leg, but everything comes back to the short leg. But it will help you keep this straight in your mind if you understand that this 30, 60, 90 triangle is really one side of an equilateral triangle where all these sides are the same. Okay, so if you think about it, for example, let's say that this was 12 on each side, 12, 12, 12, like this. Well, guess what this side of the triangle is going to be? Yeah, it's going to be 6. Alright, that just makes sense because it's being split in half. You know, of course this is 12 and this is 12, but then if you drop an altitude, that's going to be 6 and 6. So that's where this x and 2x comes from, because the 12 is the whole side of an equilateral triangle, but this short side, the short leg, is always going to be half of that. And then as far as where the altitude comes from, the deal was, you know, like if I call this, I'm going to call this A for altitude, okay? This altitude, if I do my A squared plus B squared equals C squared, if I do my Pythagorean theorem and solve this, it just turns out that this is going to be 6 radical 3. You know, if I subtract, take the square root, it just always comes out to be this leg times radical 3. Okay, so this turns out to be 6 radical 3. But anyway, so looking back at these problems, it will help you if you start by identifying the short leg. So if this is 60, this is going to be my 30. Okay? So this is the hypotenuse right here. And by the way, this is like the you know, the equilateral triangle that they're not showing. You know what I mean? So it's like this is 16, this is 16, and this is 16. Okay, so of course this y part right here is going to be half of 16. Of course this is going to be 8. Okay, now worst case scenario, I could do the Pythagorean theorem right now. I could do my x squared plus 8 squared is equal to 16 squared and find this. Or I could use the shortcut and realize that since this leg is 8, then this will be 8 radical 3. Okay, so that is how you solve it. So x is equal to 8 radical 3, and y is equal to 8. Now this image, the one here on the left, will be given to you on the test. So you don't exactly have to memorize it, but you need to be able to use it. But it will make a little bit more sense to you if you keep in your mind that this is one side of a 30, 60, 90 triangle. Looking at number 8. Okay, so this is the 30, so that means this is the 60. So in my mind, I always picture the other half of the equilateral triangle. Okay, so this is the equilateral triangle right here. So that means, so this is 2. So this is 2 right here. That means this side of my equilateral triangle is 4, which means that all of these sides are 4. Okay? So that tells me, that helps me see by my common sense that u is equal to 4, because it's equilateral, 4, 4, 4, but this one was just split in half. But anyway, the altitude, you know, so this would be that altitude, so it's kind of turned sideways, but it's always this short leg times radical 3. So this would be 2 radical 3. So that's going to give me my v. Alright, so anyway, u is equal to 4, and v is equal to 2 radical 3. Those are the answers to the question. Starting over for a second. Alright, you might not like my whole drawing the equilateral triangle thing, but if you can comfortably memorize the pattern, as far as start with a short leg. The short leg is always x. Alright, so that means in this case x is equal to 2. The hypotenuse is always 2x. And then the long leg will then be x radical 3. Okay, so another way to think of it is, alright, x equals 2. Great. If x equals 2, then that means, you know, like if I kind of substitute that in, I know that x equals 2 now, so that means that this becomes 2 times 2, which is 4. Okay, so u equals 4. And again, if x equals 2, I can sort of plug that in right there, and that gives me that v is equal to 2 radical 3. Okay, so that's another way to think about it. Either way, you get the same answer.